COSATU, the second Deputy President of COSATU, Comrade Losi, General Mbata, various other officers of our South African National Defence Force, Comrade Frini Jinwala. I don't know if Auntie Sophie is here yet, but I greet you and I greet all of you and members of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, and I recognize Minister Gwele, who is here amongst us. It is a real joy and pleasure to be amongst you. I look forward to this book that you just spoke about. Madiba and a few others of us spoke about this book and gave some thoughts and advice. And I'm hoping that in this book, Madiba will provide an answer, because I haven't seen most of it, an answer to a problem that he has left unanswered for me. And there's a bit of a void in myself in that the answer is still outstanding, of how he finally solved a particular problem and challenge. And as most of us know, Madiba was the quintessential problem solver. He was, I would reckon, the best negotiator in the world, and whatever problem he was confronted with, he was able to solve. Many of you might have heard him relate this story, which to me still ended without a solution. But I am sure that he did find a solution to this problem. And he spoke about him being President of the Republic of South Africa, and particularly how each time he went to Kunu, many of the citizens of our country found their way to Kunu to go and meet him. And that is why the visitor center in Kunu was built, so that people can go and sit and converse with him once he had an opportunity to meet them. And he told this story of this lady who came from one of the villages in that part of our country, and who waited almost all day. And finally, she was led into his office, and she said, "Madiba, I have a problem." And Madiba said, "What is your problem?" She said, and Madiba, introducing the issue, said, "You know, when you are President of the Republic, you deal with all manner of problems, both big and small, and very intricate." And she said, "My neighbor has stolen my chicken." And he said, "You know, Cyril, I have to deal with problems of stolen chickens." And she continued, "He has stolen my chicken." And Madiba said, "Who is this neighbor?" She mentioned the name, and Madiba, being the good problem solver that he is, had him called in because he lived nearby. And so he came, and Madiba said, "This lady says you've stolen her chicken. Is that true?" And he said, "I did take her chicken." And he said, "Where is the chicken?" And he said, "I've eaten it." And Madiba turns and he says he has eaten the chicken. But she said, "I want my chicken." And Madiba says, "How much is the chicken? Are you prepared to pay for this chicken?" He said, "Yes, I'm prepared to pay. I'll give her 25 rand right now." And Madiba says, he wants to give you 25 rand. Are you willing to accept 25 rand? She said, no, I want my chicken. And as he was telling this story, we were interrupted somehow, as we often were, and he never told me the end of the story. So I'm looking forward to reading this book, because this void in my soul will be filled, because I do need to have an answer. I, as many of us do, we often invoke Madiba's wisdom, Madiba's approach to problems as we encounter problems. And we often ask ourselves, what would Madiba have done? And I now want to find out how he solved this problem. Because as deputy president, I think it might happen to me one day as well, that one of you sitting here, particularly the deputy secretary of COSATU, who's sitting here, might present me with such a problem as we try to solve COSATU's problems. It is really an honor, and a deeply humbling honor it is to have been invited to give this lecture in the memory of the founding father of our nation and our democracy, to give this lecture in honor of Isitwalandwe Siaparangwe Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. And true to Madiba's own inclinations, we are not here this evening to mourn Madiba. We are rather here to remember a lot of things about him, but also to remember him and what he taught us and what he stood for. We are here to reflect on the present and in a way also deliberate on the future. From his life, we're able to deal with the present, but we are also able to use Madiba's life as a platform to look into the future. We are here to examine Madiba's legacy and ask ourselves what it is that we need to build on it. As we reflect on Madiba's life and contribution, we must heed the words spoken by Cicero in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar when he says, "Men may construe things after their fashion, clean from the purpose of the things themselves. For there is always the risk that in seeking to interpret Madiba's life, and indeed his legacy, we emphasize that which serves the purposes of the present, or worse, that which seeks to advance our own interests. In doing so, there's a risk that we obscure the complexity and nuance that must necessarily form part of so rich and so profound a life. We should therefore proceed with caution, even mindful of our responsibility to remember Madiba as he really was and describe his legacy as it truly is. Nelson Mandela was one of the most remarkable people to which this continent, and indeed our country, has given birth to. To millions across the globe, he was a moral icon. And they saw him as a leader, but much more than that, they saw Madiba as a moral icon. And yet, as he would be the first to acknowledge, he was not without fault. And he often said, he is not a saint. He had the courage to make mistakes, and he also had the wisdom to admit his own mistakes. One doesn't often find this in leaders. Leaders don't often admit that we have made mistakes. Madiba had that courage. And that is what sets him apart from many of us who are leaders today. Though he may be one of the finest amongst us, none should deny that he too possessed of human frailty. Yet it is thanks to his essential humanity that we are able to recognize in him so much of what we seek to see in ourselves. We are able to aspire to emulate his example precisely because we can see in him a huge part of ourselves. As we seek to build on Madiba's legacy, we should reflect on how the principles that Madiba espoused and relentlessly pursued can shape our own moral framework and guide our actions. For Nelson Mandela, morality was not theoretical. It was very practical. It is the means by which people could improve their condition. It is the means by which we could change the world. Morality provided a touchstone by which one could measure one's actions and guide one's decisions. Our struggle, amongst many other struggles, is also a moral struggle. If we are to build on Madiba's legacy, we need both to continue the work that he began and hold true the moral posture that Madiba adopted. We should seek to pursue at all times that which is right and true and just, no matter how inconvenient, how unpopular, or how difficult. Comrades and friends, the world today is a better place thanks to the contribution of Nelson Mandela and many of his generation. It is thanks to them that today we can celebrate 20 years of freedom in peace and unity. It is thanks to them that our people have equal rights, that millions more of our people have houses, they have water, and they have electricity. It is thanks to them that there are now opportunities for young people that were unimaginable 2 decades ago. Importantly, it is thanks to people like Madiba and his generation that we have dignity and pride, confidence and hope. But the legacy that we honor this evening extends beyond the rights achieved and the lives improved. For Madiba was a person both of conviction and conscience. He understood that revolution is grounded in morality, politics bound by principle. He understood that a society such as ours, which is characterized by such enormous disparities of wealth and opportunity, is not only unsustainable, it is also morally indefensible. There is something profoundly wrong with a world in which so many have so little and so few have so much. It explains why the movement that Madiba led, the African National Congress, has consistently asserted a bias towards the poor and the working people of our country, the working class. It is why we have always sought to choose the side of the oppressed, the marginalized, and the exploited. As we work to build on Madiba's legacy, we need to constantly remind ourselves of this very important principle and approach to our transformation and our revolution. It is a principle that must guide those who control the levers of state power. It must guide those who exercise economic power as well. We cannot accept the wasteful use of public resources. We cannot accept the misuse of public resources, and we cannot accept the theft of public resources. Madiba's morality dictated that this should not and cannot be accepted. And we need to actively combat a culture that associates public office with entitlement, a culture where there is a tenuous relationship between misdemeanor and consequence. We need to consistently reinforce the precept that people do come first. That batho batla pele, people must come first. All our resources, all our energies must be devoted to serving the people, the poor, and the powerless in particular in our society. We would be foolish to believe that this is easily accomplished. Those who bear this responsibility are often faced with difficult and complex choices. Resources need to be allocated between competing social priorities. Funds provided to build roads may otherwise have been used to refurbish clinics, employ more teachers, or build more houses. Choices sometimes need to be made between jobs created, lives improved, and skills imparted. There are moments too when the law seems at odds with justice, when development appears at odds with compassion. Those who must deal with illegal land invasions, for example, must confront these very contradictions. For it is they that must make the hard choices between integrated planning and the rule of law and the prospect of families spending cold nights out in the veld. These are the moments when we must consider not just the legal consequences of our actions, but also the morality of our actions, as Madiba would have done. These are the matters about which, as a society, we need to reflect, and to reflect deeply and honestly as well. This is not just an issue for the state. It is an issue for all of us. It is also an issue for business. It is an issue for all social formations and sectors. We seek moral behavior not only amongst our public representatives and civil servants. We seek it too amongst our business leaders, professionals, workers, as well as community workers. If we are honest about our devotion to the principles that Madiba embodied and stood for, then we all need to act in a way that gives them meaning. If there is any value in the millions of rands that corporate South Africa spent in paying homage to Madiba, then business needs to embrace the implications of his message. For business has a responsibility not merely to pay tax, comply with regulations, and treat employees fairly. It has a responsibility to be an active participant in the fundamental transformation of the economy of our country. It has a moral responsibility, at least as equal in weight as those of its social partners, to confront poverty, unemployment, and inequality. These are issues that business, acting morally, needs to confront as well. Our sense of justice should be deeply offended by a society in which islands of wealth are surrounded by a sea of poverty. Each of us has a role to play in achieving a prosperous, more equitable society in which all may enjoy equal opportunity. And we are called upon to find ways in which we can play this role. Each of us has a role to play in the improvement of the lives of all South Africans, be it living conditions of migrant workers, the provision of housing and essential services to people in informal settlements, or ensuring that those who live in rural areas have the means and the opportunity to make a living of the land on which they live. Nelson Mandela sought not only the liberation of South Africa, but also a better, more just, more equitable world. He spoke out against discrimination in all forms and manifestations. He spoke out against injustice and oppression and exploitation across the world. He asked what was the value of our freedom when the people of Palestine remained under occupation, when millions still lived in slavery, when over 1 billion people in the world lived in extreme poverty, and the powerful still wage war on the powerless. Like him, we should be bound by our principles to seek the resolution of conflict, the defeat of global poverty, and end to the environmental degradation of our world, and the establishment of a more democratic system of global governance. Like him, we should not be daunted by the scale of the undertaking, nor deterred by the myriad obstacles that we will confront. It is a matter of great significance and much encouragement that Madiba was greatly respected and loved by so many people across the world. It gives us hope that his principles are equally shared by the many governments, organizations, citizens of the world that joined us in mourning his passing. It gives us confidence that there exists across the world both the will and the means to achieve meaningful progress. It gives us confidence as well that there exists the possibility that the nations of the world, especially those that are most powerful, will cast aside narrow self-interest in favor of the equal advancement of all the world's peoples. Comrades and friends, the principles that Madiba embodied find meaning both at the lofty heights of global affairs and in our day-to-day interactions with each other. It was in respecting the equal rights and dignity of all people that Madiba made his greatest contribution to our sense of worth and purpose. It must therefore be a matter of grave concern that we live in a society where respect for the rights and integrity of another is so frequently and shamelessly violated. As a society, as individuals, we cannot allow to continue the violence that is perpetrated against women and children. We must challenge the notion that women must occupy a position of lesser importance in the home, in the workplace, in the classroom, and generally in society. Madiba would never have supported that. We must encourage all sexually active South Africans, particularly the young, to respect themselves and their partners, to use condoms consistently, stick to one sexual partner, and get tested for HIV at least once a year. Many people infected with HIV still face discrimination and abuse. This is irrational and unacceptable. It is an affront to our shared humanity, and we must do all that we can to stop it, just as Madiba would have done everything he could to stop it. Though our society faces many challenges, we are confident that we have it in us to prevail. South Africans have demonstrated a tremendous capacity to overcome even the most intractable problems. When the world almost gave up on us with regards to solving the apartheid problem, we were able to rise to the challenge as the people of this country and found a workable solution under the leadership of Nelson Mandela. We have it in us to treat each other with respect and to place the needs of others above our own, just as Nelson Mandela did, to a point where he was even prepared to sacrifice his own life so that we could all be free. We have it in us to heal the divisions of the past and eradicate the inequalities of the present. We have it in us to build a future in which all may enjoy equal rights and equal opportunities. By working together, which is what Nelson Mandela taught us, by holding true to the values that Madiba embodied, by drawing inspiration from his life and his work, we will be able to properly honor his memory and complete the long walk that he began. And as he ended his book, he said, indeed, there is still a long walk ahead. And that long walk has now been left to us. His long walk is over. He has now handed the reins and the baton to all of us as South Africans. May we continue living Madiba's legacy, but more importantly, may we be imbued by the morality that Nelson Mandela has had to teach the world. Madiba, more than anything else, was known as a moral icon around the world. Let us be as moral in whatever we do as Madiba was. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. I thought I should just mention that I'm not so sure about the chicken story. I know that Prof said I will be under the spotlight, but I'm not so sure that that one I'll fulfill. But don't worry, there will be interviews, and as part of the interviews, you might find that someone managed to complete the story, or Madiba finished the story to them. So look out for the book, and you might find it, and I'll tell you if it's in there. But I thought also that thanks for a very powerful speech, which I was reminded, someone sent me an SMS saying, I hope the Deputy President will mention and congratulate Miss World.